saying the same thing. You've been mugged, so why shouldn't your less deserving neighbour be mugged as well? A cynical attempt to turn large sections of its own people against each other. But that's where we come in. Because all of you will know, often better than myself, there's no shortage of anger out there. There's no shortage of fear. But there's one thing missing, and that's hope. And it was Harvey Milk, the crusading civil rights campaigner in the 1970s, who said this: "I know you cannot live on hope alone, but without it life is not worth living." And the point is, it doesn't matter how angry people get. It doesn't matter how scared they get. If they don't have hope, they don't fight back. They might yell at the TV, their anger might be turned at their neighbour, but they won't have the confidence to fight back. And that's where we come in. We've got to give people hope. And we do that by offering a coherent alternative that actually resonates with people. I just want to talk a few ideas, and I hammer about these down to death. Some of you will have heard it all before, but the fact is our enemies hammer their messages time and time again. They drill them into people's skulls, and we've got to do the same. So they say to us, spending on social security is too high. Might surprise some of you, they've got a point. It's not to do with a bunch of lazy scroungers dribbling on sofas all day in mansions made out of widescreen television sets as they churn 80 kids out every week. It's because of this. We've got a triple crisis. We've got a housing crisis, a low wages crisis, and a jobs crisis. People have absolutely every right to be furious about the £24 billion of housing benefit being wasted each year. It's not lining the pockets of the tenants. It's lining the pockets of private landlords charging extortionate rents because successive governments won't be able to pay. As well as controlling rents, give councils the power to build housing, creating jobs, stimulating the economy, bringing down housing benefits. The same with tax credits. Tax credits are a lifeline for millions, but let's be honest. They're a subsidy for low pay because bosses aren't paying their workers properly. So we should demand, no ifs and no buts, a living wage. And with a living wage, we'll spend less on tax credits and other in-work benefits. And when you put money in the pockets of the poorest, they don't shove it in a bank account in the Cayman Islands like the people at the top do. They go out and spend it. And of course, the jobs crisis. 6.5 million people now looking for full-time work that just doesn't exist. The other week in Hull, over 600 people applied for just one job as an administrator. That is the reality of desperation out there that is ignored. So we must call for an industrial strategy to create hundreds of thousands of renewable energy jobs, as Germany have done, to take on the environmental and the jobs crisis. Let's talk about the banks. The reality is we nationalise the debt and privatise the profit. We, the people who bailed those banks out, have no control over them. So we must demand that we, the people who bailed them out, have democratic control of our banks, a public investment bank to rebuild our shattered economy. Let's talk about tax justice. We hear about benefit fraud every single day. It does exist. Less than 1% of total social security spending, 1.2 billion a year. Compare that to £25 billion every single year because the people at the top aren't paying their taxes. Amazon, Google, Sir Philip Green. So we must demand, again, no ifs, no buts, to change the law so it says clearly, unambiguously, whoever you are, you will pay your taxes. And friends, we've got to be more radical than that. We've got to talk about, for example, childcare. The fact the average family now spends a third of their average income on their kids. In Sweden, it's capped, it's 3%. They have an excellent state-run childcare system. It pays for itself because people can go out and work. Let's talk about the fact we have extortionate railway ticket prices because we now spend as a country, as taxpayers, 4 times more on our privatised fragmented service. So again, let's demand, as each franchise expires, bring them into public ownership with passengers elected onto board. How the railway. That's why I'm so excited about this People's Assembly. Because, I'll be honest, in the past, people who wanted a bit of social justice had a bit of a bad rep for basically being a bit people's front of Judea. I suspect some of you are smirking more of bitterness than anything else. The point is, we could afford then to quibble over minor details. But too much is at stake now. And the point of this is to bring together as broad a front as possible. So millions of public sector and private sector workers, whether you're in the Labour Party, Plaid, the Green Party or no party at all, campaigners for disabled people, young people, elderly people, people fighting for tax justice, as broad a coalition as possible. And of course we'll disagree. Of course there'll be dissent. Of course we'll argue over this or that. Good. Every democratic movement, that should be the lifeblood. But at the end of the day, what we've got to decide is this. Even when we disagree over this detail or that priority, we're on the same side. And that's what we must remember as we build this movement. And the most important things coming up, of course, are the Tories having the cheek to invade my home city, Manchester. They'll get a very warm Mancunian welcome. I hope as many people as possible can make it. On the 5th of November, there's going to be a day of national civil disobedience and protest, and I hope activities are organised here as part of that. Because I just want to end by saying this, and this is why it's so important what we're doing, as well as giving people hope. The reality is, everything we have, all the rights, all the gains, they weren't given to us by the goodwill and generosity of those above. They were won by the struggle and sacrifice of those below. Our mothers and our fathers, our grandfathers and our grandmothers. They built this country. They built the welfare state, the NHS, workers' rights, everything previous generations took for granted. It is not for us to allow that to be stripped away. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And that is why we must stand in that tradition, courageously, bravely, standing up for people's rights, if you like, but also standing for a different sort of country. Not just fighting austerity, but fighting for a society that is run in the interests of working people. And it was Nye Bevan, of course, who said this: the NHS will last as long as there are folk left with a faith to fight for it. It doesn't just apply to the NHS, it applies to so much else. We have that faith, we have that fight, and if we stand together, we fight together, we will win this together. Thank you.